This one, eh? Okay. Very good morning to all of you. So, in the last class, we have discussed about the infertility. As you know, infertility is defined as the failure to conceive within 1 year of unprotected coitus and without any use of contraceptive. So, we have discussed in detail about the causes and history taking and examination, and also the investigations of both the couples. So today we'll discuss about the management of infertility. As you know, it is meant to manage, or the management of infertility is very challenging because the couples are in great psychological stress, and as the investigations proceeds, they are also in great stress. So psychologically, they should be managed very tactically and with judicious manner, with consolations, and so in the management, the counseling is the most important one, and the both partners should be seen together at a time at the first visit, and also say should be history taking should be taken. History should be taken at together at a time, and also separately after that. So privacy and sufficient clinical time should be given for their management, and most important is counseling. So each stage in investigation and treatment of infertility should be fully explained to the couple, and the patient should be fully involved in decision making. What are the treatment to be given, and what are the further investigations to be taken? All detail, she should be fully involved. And about the sexual history, correct sexual history should be given, and mostly about the ovulation period should be told to them, and timely intercourse should be advised. And smoking reduces both women's fertility as well as semen quality. So smoking should be avoided, as well as the alcohol should be avoided. And you should know the BMI, body mass index. If more than 29, it is associated with reduced fertility in both men and women. So about that, the weight reduction should be advised, and folic acid supplementation should be given even before conception, and usually before 3 months of conception, and after pregnancy up to 12 weeks. It should be continued. So immunization, rubella immunization should be checked, and if she was vaccinated for rubella, then she is advised to avoid pregnancy for at least 1 month after completion of vaccination. So first of all, we'll discuss the management of male infertility, which is the most challenging out of these two, male and female infertility. The management of male infertility is most challenging and difficult to manage sometimes. So the male partner should be preceded by clinical examination, detailed clinical examination, including an assessment of secondary sexual characteristics and testicular size. Then endocrine tests, microbiological assessment of semen, and imaging of the genital tract should be started. Then other investigations like in vitro tests of sperm function can be of use in predicting fertility. You should know the sperm function should be known, and if required, surgery on the male genital tract should be carried out. According to the cause of the male infertility, the management will vary. So we have discussed in last class the etiology of male infertility. So accordingly, the management will vary, and mostly in male infertility, when there is oligospermia or azoospermia or impotence is there, then the management will continue, and the testicular biopsy should be performed only in the context of tertiary service where there are facilities for sperm recovery and cryostorage. So when there is azoospermia, when there is no sperm, no spermatozoa in the semen, then testicular biopsy should be known whether there is produced spermatozoa are produced in the testis or not, when there is no tubal, this basal obstruction may be there due to azoospermia. Both should be excluded. Basal obstruction and testicular production should be confirmed. And if there is vasectomy already done, then vasectomy reversal is to be done, and it is also very effective management and also successful treatment. And if there is epididymal blockage, that should be also corrected to release the obstructive azoospermia. Then for a diagnosis of hypogonadotrophic hypogonadism, that is WHO type 1, if there is hypogonadotrophic hypogonadism, then the male partner, the use of gonadotropin drugs is an effective fertility treatment. So gonadotropins should be given. Here the hypogonadotrophic condition is there, means FSH and LH is less. So gonadotropin should be added, or else gonadotropin releasing hormone can be given so that the hypothalamo-pituitary axis will be stimulated, and so also the increase of gonadotropins, FSH, LH, which results in ovulation. Then if there is hyperprolactinemia, then bromocriptine or cabergoline, that is long-acting bromocriptine, long-acting drug, cabergoline, is also effective to reduce the prolactin level, which is the hyperprolactinemia is the cause of impotency and also anovulation. So usually cabergoline in a dose of 2.5 to 5 milligram once or twice weekly is given. Then if required, then IUI or intrauterine insemination is also used whenever required, and treatment of will discuss detail about the IUI also. Then infection of the male genital tract should be treated when present. Then antiestrogens, androgens, bromocriptine, and kinase enhancing drugs have not been shown to be effective in the treatment of male infertility. But in female infertility, antiestrogens like clomiphene citrate is the drug of choice. As you know, it is the ovulating drug, but it is not so effective. What can be used also for treatment of increased spermatogenesis? Clomiphene citrate can be used in male infertility, but it has limited role. Unlike in case of female infertility, where antiestrogens like clomiphene citrate has a very good result. So it is used more commonly for induction of ovulation. Then antioxidants are also used, but less commonly. And then use of systemic corticosteroids or dexamethasone in a dose of 0.5 milligram daily at bedtime is given for the treatment of anti-sperm antibodies. Then in vitro fertilization or intracytoplasmic sperm injection, it is we'll discuss in the ART, artificial reproductive technology, and it is also effective treatment for the male infertility. Usually, EC is most commonly nowadays it is used in almost all cases of male infertility, and so it is more commonly used. And sperms for EC can be obtained by TSA, means from the sperm aspiration, testicular sperm aspiration. From the testis, sperm is aspirated and EC is done. So, sperms of EC can be obtained by TSA or testicular sperm aspiration directly from the testicular biopsy as well as aspiration from the epididymis. So when there is aspermia, when there is no ejaculate in the male, then what is the management of aspermia? It may be aspermia may be due to erectile dysfunction and retrograde ejaculation. So when there is erectile dysfunction, then supportive psychotherapy is most important, and also the treatment of underlying conditions should be done, and the drugs like papaverine and sildenafil citrate can be used. Nowadays, sildenafil in a dose of 25 to 100 milligram, single dose is given 1 hour before the coitus. It can be used for erectile dysfunction, and IUI, intrauterine insemination, also can be done. And if any drug use, if the patient is using drug like antihypertensive, antidepressants, anti-cancer drugs, that should be also withheld because they may cause erectile dysfunction. So that should be told to the patient. Then when there is retrograde ejaculation, retrograde ejaculation means ejaculation occurs in the retrograde manner. So it is inside the bladder. So sperm is inside the bladder. So that spermatozoa can be collected from the urine and used for IUI or IVF, in vitro fertilization or intrauterine insemination. Then what is the treatment of azoospermia? So when there is no sperm in the spermatozoa, there is no spermatozoa in the semen, then what are the treatment? So again, we have already discussed about the causes of the azoospermia, pre-testicular, testicular, or post-testicular. So accordingly, the management will vary. So when there is pre-testicular azoospermia, means there is abnormality or failure in case of hypothalamus pituitary level. So gonadotropin releasing hormone therapy is of value. It should be given. Gonadotropin releasing hormone therapy should be given, and HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin, followed by the human menopausal gonadotropin. In that case also, HCG is, it has LH-like action, and HMG, human menopausal gonadotropin, is the combination of FSH, follicular stimulating hormone, and LH. 75 international unit of FSH and 75 international unit of LH. HMG contains both FSH and LH, and if then it can be of donor insemination, AID, artificial insemination of donor, or testicular azoospermia, then this testicular sperm extraction or testicular sperm aspiration. Spermatozoa can be collected from the testis either by extraction or extraction or aspiration. In case of testicular azoospermia, then it can be used as ART. Then if there is post-testicular azoospermia, post-testicular means there may be block, basal block, then due to vasectomy, or there may be obstruction in the epidermis. So end-to-end anastomosis of epididymis and vasoepididymostomy or vasostomy, or from the epididymis, sperm aspiration can be done, or from the mesa or pesa, from the sperm aspiration is done from the epididymis. Then the intrauterine insemination, AI, is commonly used in case of male infertility. So what are the indications of intrauterine inseminations? What are the indications? Like unexplained infertility. Even if all investigations done in case of male and female, still then there is no conception. So in that case, intrauterine insemination has a value, and other indications of intrauterine insemination are male factor infertility, or there may be cervical factor, and or minimal or mild endometriosis. Then semen processing is done in case of intrauterine insemination, and then in that case, intrauterine insemination, after semen processing, then superovulation with clomiphene citrate or gonadotropins is done for this stimulation of ovulation, and the monitoring should be done, and accordingly the spermatozoa is inseminated into the uterine cavity. Intrauterine insemination is done, and sometimes intracervical insemination also done. So timing of, at the time of ovulation, the insemination is done, and the exact timing should be ideal, and it is known by follicular monitoring when the 1 or 2 bigger follicles measuring about 18 to 20 mm in size, in diameter, and this is the time of ovulation, and so SCG is given in a dose of 5,000 to 10,000 intramuscularly to trigger ovulation when the follicular size of 18 to 20 millimeter in diameter. Then the human chorionic gonadotropin in a dose of 5,000 to 10,000 international unit IM is given, so that ovulation usually occurs after 36 hours of SCG administration. So accordingly, the intrauterine insemination is done. So this is the IUI, how to prepare the sample. So it can be a very highly concentrated sample of healthy sperm should be taken, and monitoring of ovulation is done, and the optimal time is to know the ovulation. This after. Then what is the timing of intrauterine insemination? As we have already discussed, this timing around the ovulation. So usually in a 28-day cycle, menstrual cycle, normal cycle, ovulation occurs on the 14th day. So around that period, in normal cycle, natural cycles, the IUI, intrauterine insemination, is done twice on the day 12 and day 14 of menstrual cycle. Then if clomiphene is used for induction of ovulation, then IUI usually given or done 7 days after completion of CC, cited, because ovulation occurs 7 days after completion of citrate. So IUI is given after 7 days of citrate. Then urinary LH detection. So urinary kit is by kit, urinary LH can be detected. So IUI is given 24 hours after color change in case of urinary LH kit. Then because after LH detection in urinary kit, 24 hours after that ovulation occurs. So IUI is done 24 hours after color change in case of urinary LH kit. Then when the HCG, human coronary gonadotrophy, is used and sonography is there, then when we have already discussed, when the follicular size, the bigger follicular size of 18 millimeter, 18 to 20 millimeter in diameter, then HCG is given in a dose of 5,000 to 10,000 entrance unit iron. So IUI is given after again around as ovulation occurs at 36 hours of HCG administration. So around that period, IUI should be given twice at 34 hours after and at 40 hours after of HCG administration, so that it will coincide with the ovulation after HCG administration. That is, ovulation occurs 36 hours of HCG administration. So how to, next is sperm harvesting or sperm retrieval procedures, how to retrieve the sperm when there is no spermatozoa in the ejaculate. So it may be due to obstetric azoospermia or non-obstetric azoospermia due to failure of sperm production. See, the most common cause of obstetric azoospermia is prior vasectomy. When he has vasectomy, then that is the main cause of obstetric azoospermia. But other causes include prior infection, prior hernia repair with mesh or other prior surgery on the testis, which may cause also obstetric azoospermia. So in case of non-obstetric azoospermia, again, it may be due to genetic condition and prior testicle infections or hormone abnormalities. Then sperm can be retrieved using an open surgical approach or through the skin using a needle, or we have discussed the aspirate the sperm from the testis or from the epidermis. So percutaneous epididymal sperm extraction or percutaneous epididymal sperm aspiration. So PESA means A means aspiration, E means extraction. So PESA or testicular sperm aspiration TESA are similar procedure where a needle is used to extract sperm from the testicle or epidermis. In TESA from the testis and in PESA from the epidermis. So then both of these procedures can often be performed with only mild sedation and local anesthesia. And here a needle is inserted into the testicle or epidermis. An attempt is made to collect sperm. So here the sperm is aspirated from the testis or epidermis. Then the sample collected is immediately examined under a microscope to look out for healthy sperm. So it can be used as a first line approach for sperm collection. If there is azoospermia, then it can be collected from the epidermis or the testis. and most effective when trying to collect sperm in a man who has undergone a vasectomy and the epidermis is enlarged. So, aspiration of the spermatozoa from the epidermis or the testis, pessa or tessa. If it is extracted, then percutaneous epididymal sperm extraction, tesse, or testicular sperm extraction, tesse. Then MESA means microscopic epididymal sperm extraction. It is another method of sperm extraction to extract or aspirate from the epididymis using the high-level microscope. So here it is the technique for collecting sperm that involves using a surgical microscope to open the small tubes within the epidermis to look for sperm. This technique works well in conditions where sperms are being produced in adequate numbers but are blocked from traveling from the testicle to the ejaculate. So, this usually occurs in case of prior vasectomy or prior hernia repair with mesh or blockage of the seminal vesicle. So, here the extraction of the sperm from the epidermis is done using the surgical microscope. So, an operating microscope and special skills are necessary to identify the tubes most likely to contain sperm, and the samples are immediately examined to look for sperm. Then the sperm is harvested from the epidermis and generally considered better quality than sperm harvested directly from the testicle because they have had more time to mature. Then testicular sperm extraction, tesse. Here also another method from where the sperm is extracted from the testis. So in this tesse or testicular sperm extraction, the one bunch of tissue is taken directly from the testicle and examined for the presence of sperm. So here the one bunch of tissue is taken from the testis so that presence of sperm is there, that should be examined. And this technique is very successful in cases of obstructive azoospermia, where there is blockage of the tubes responsible for transporting sperm from the testicle to the ejaculate. So, tesse or microtesse performed with a microscope means testicular sperm extraction requires general or spinal anesthesia and an incision on the scrotum to gain access to the testicles. Depending on the underlying medical condition, the testicle is either incised in several locations to harvest sperm or completely open to reveal all the sperm producing cells. So several samples are taken and immediately examined for the presence of sperm. So here anesthesia is a must because it's a lengthier process other than the aspiration process. So in extraction, as one bunch of tissue is to be taken, so general anesthesia, spinal anesthesia is to be given. And this procedure has been successful in finding sperm in many conditions, though to result in infertility such as Klinefelter's syndrome, genetic cause of male infertility, and also in case of congenital absence of vas deferens. So other causes of male infertility also should be treated, and those are the most important causes. If there is immunological causes, anti-sperm antibodies, there also should be treated with dexamethasone 0.5 milligram. At bedtime, it should be given anti-sperm antibodies, and mainly the psychological causes also to be taken into account. Then the female infertility. So we have, the female infertility, there may be tubal causes ovarian causes and peritoneal causes and uterine, cervical, vaginal, idiopathic and unexplained infertility. So one after one we'll discuss what is the management of female infertility. So first of all, tubal infertility. When there is tubal cause, the etiology of female infertility is tube, fallopian tubes. Then tubal, according to the type of, again, tubal cause, the management will vary, and ideally the tubal surgery should be carried out only in centers where there is appropriate facilities and trained staff. We carry very highly sophisticated surgery that is known as tuboplasty, microsurgery. So it should be done well in the hospital or center with the full facilities and with well-trained doctors. Then where proximal tubal obstruction, it may be proximal tubal obstruction or distal or mid distal tube obstruction. Accordingly, the management will vary. So where there is proximal tubal obstruction, then this should be confirmed by the selective salpingography, and a tubal catheterization procedure may be attempted. If there is small tubal obstruction, a mucus may block the proximal tube, then it can be dislodged and conception can occur. And tubal surgery may be appropriate for selected cases of mild distal tubal disease or proximal tubal obstruction. We will discuss later on detail about the treatment. And in next slide, and in pregnancy, if pregnancy has not occurred within 12 months of tubal surgery, IVF should be discussed. In vitro fertilization should be discussed. So when there is distal tubal block, distal tubal surgery, that is using the microsurgical approach, using magnification should be used. Then a laparoscopic approach can be used for adhesiolysis when there is adhesions of the tube at the fimbria, at the distal end of the tube, fallopian tube. Then adhesiolysis more commonly by the appropriate laparoscopic approach should be used, but sometimes also laparotomy can be done. But laparoscopic approach of adhesiolysis is better than the laparotomy. And so laparoscopic approach should be used for adhesiolysis, and but the use of this approach for salpingostomy needs more evaluation. So when there is block in the fimbria, we'll have to do salpingostomy, opening of the blocked fimbrial end. So by laparoscopy, it is very difficult approach, but it can be done also. Otherwise, by laparotomy, salpingostomy can be done when there is completely blockage of the fimbrial end of the fallopian tube. Then IVF, in vitro fertilization, should be considered as the first line treatment for moderate to severe distal tubal disease, because the success rate is very less in case of severe distal tubal disease. After severe distal tubal disease, the success rate is very less. So IVF should be ideal. And presence of hydrosalpinges is associated with reduced pregnancy rates following IVF. Again, the management depends upon the size of the hydrosalpinx. If it is small size, it can be managed conservatively. Otherwise, if there is a bigger size hydrosalpinx, more than 4 centimeter in size, then that resection of the excision of the hydrosalpinx should be done, and IVF should be the idea in that case. Then when there is the tubectomy, in case of sterilized operation, so tubal reanastomosis is the effective treatment who has tubal sterilization, and again it depends upon the site of tubal sterilization and age of the patient, and after how many years it is now being done. All depends upon success, depends upon the everything about this factor also. And another is the length. What is the length of the tube after surgery? It should be more than 4 centimeter. Then there will be the success rate is high. So high success rates can be achieved when reversing mechanical tubal occlusion using a microsurgical approach. The success rate is high after tubal reanastomosis, ischemic anastomosis. In case of ischemic tubal reanastomosis, the success rate is high. Usually, the patency of the tube after reanastomosis is achieved in 70% cases, and in those 70% cases of successful recanalization, the pregnancy rate is about 80%, 80 to 90%. So the after tubal reanastomosis, the success rate is high, and in vitro fertilization should be considered as the first line treatment for moderate to severe tubal disease, because there is destruction of the tubal disease, and in those cases when there is moderate to severe tubal disease and there is more destruction of the fallopian tubes, so there is less successful after surgery. So in vitro fertilization is the treatment of choice. So this table shows the treatment of tubal occlusion. When there is proximal tubal occlusion, then selective salpingography is done, or radiologically guided tubal cannulation, which will dislodge the small mucous plug, small obstructive plug, which can be dislodged. And histoscopy cannulation, tubal cannulation histoscopically can be done to dislodge the small obstruction, or microsurgery resection of and anastomosis, usually in case of tubectomy. After tubectomy, the resection and end-to-end anastomosis is done, or in tubocorneal anastomosis is done also, and according to the site of obstruction. Then when there is distal tubal occlusion at the femoral end, there is occlusion. The femoral end is occluded. Then there is fimbrioplasty or neosalpingostomy, an opening. New opening is to be made in case of completely blocked femoral end of the tube. So a new salpingostomy or opening in the fallopian tube is made newly, or if there is a hydrosalpinx is more than 4 centimeter in size, then salpingectomy should be done, and then IVF is advised. Then this is all about tuboplasty operation. So tuboplasty operation is very highly sophisticated operation, microsurgery, and here first is adhesiolysis or salpingo-ovariolysis, when there is lysis or division of the adhesions on the salpinges or the ovaries. So here the separation or division of the adhesions are done. Then fimbrioplasty means separation of the fimbrial adhesions to open of the abdominal ostia. When there is adhesions at the abdominal ostia, fimbrial end, then fimbrioplasty is done to separate the fimbrial adhesions. Then salpingostomy, here the new opening is made, and it is called terminal or cuff at the abdominal ostium. So new opening is created in a completely occluded tube. The tube is occluded completely. So the eversion of the new ostium is maintained by few stitches of 6-0 vicryl. To maintain the patency of the tube, the new ostium should be everted by the few stitches of the 6-0 vicryl. Then tubal anastomosis. when the segment of the disease tube following tubectomy operation is resected and end-to-end anastomosis is done. Here the resection or the site of the obstruction, then end-to-end anastomosis or tubal anastomosis is done. It is most successful method of end-to-end anastomosis, tubal anastomosis. Then tubocorneal anastomosis. When there is a corneal block, then the remaining healthy tube is anastomosed to the patient's interstitial part of the tube. So tubocorneal anastomosis is done in case of corneal block. Then when there is ovulatory cause, ovulation is dysfunction of the ovulation or anovulation, then what is the treatment? It is also important cause of female infertility. And then ideally the clomipene, there are many drugs to ovulatory drugs are there, out of which clomipene is an effective drug for treatment of anovulation, and usually the pregnancy rate is high, and the ovulation induction with clomipene should only be performed in circumstances which allow access to the ovarian ultrasound monitoring, because there are also side effects. There may be overstimulation of the ovary, hyperstimulation, OHSS, hyper ovarian stimulation may occur due to ovarian ovulation induction. So monitoring of the follicle should be done properly. So when there is ovulation or monitoring facilities available, ovulation induction should be done. Then what are the drugs for induction of ovulation? Here the clomipene is the first drug of choice for the induction of ovulation, and letrozole aromatase inhibitor. It is also used antiestrogenic. Clomipene is antiestrogenic. Here also letrozole is antiestrogenic, and human menopausal gonadotropin, which contains follicular stimulating hormone FSH 75 international unit and LH 75 international unit. And nowadays more better FSH follicular stimulating hormone preparations are available, like purified urinary FSH and highly purified urinary FSH, and recombinant FSH, which is the best among all FSH, recombinant FSH with least side effects. Or there may be also availability of recombinant LH or SCG, human gonadotropin, or recombinant SCG also available, and gonadotropin releasing hormone can be used, and also gonadotropin releasing hormone analogs can be also used for stimulation of ovulation. And for correction of biochemical abnormality, if there is hyperinsulinemia, which is the cause of anovulation or ovarian dysfunction, so insulin sensitizer like metformin is used for the treatment of hyperinsulinemia. And when there is androgen excess, dexamethasone is used, and when there is hyperprolactinemia, dopamine agonist like bromocriptine or cabergoline is used. Then as substitution therapy, when there is subclinical hypothyroidism, thyroxine is used, and when there is diabetes mellitus, then anti-diabetics drugs should be used, and in case of presence of congenital adrenal hyperplasia, corticosteroids are given. Then, as you know, you should know about clomipene citrate as the first drug of ovulation induction. So it is effective for ovulatory patient. As you know, clomipene citrate is given from the day 2 of the menstrual cycle usually, but it can be started from any day, from day 2 to day 6, or usually from the day 2 of the menstrual cycle in a dose of 50 milligram daily for 5 days. And the monitoring of the follicle for ovulation is done, and if there is no response, then the increment dose of clomiphene citrate per cycle is 50 milligram. So first cycle, the dose is 50 milligram. Then another cycle, if there is no response, then it is the 100 milligram. If there is no response, then third cycle is 150 milligram. So usually maximum 150, but sometimes it can be increased to 250 milligram. So it can be also used in unexplained infertility, and so it is usually clomiphene citrate is most effective for women with normal FSH. So normogonadotrophic and normoprolactin. So with normal FSH and estrogen, and it induces ovulation by the, and as it is anti-estrogen, it is known, not unknown. Sometimes the mechanism of action of clomiphene citrate, it is mostly strongly anti-estrogenic and mildly estrogenic. So as it is strongly anti-estrogenic, it antagonizes the action of estrogen. So it inhibits the inhibitory action of estrogen on the hypothalamus. So there is blockage of the negative action of the estrogen on the gonadotropin releasing hormone. So as there is, it antagonizes the estrogen. So there is negative action is blocked. So there is increased secretion of the gonadotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus. So in turn, there is gonadotropins are increased in secretion from the pituitary. So it is the main action of the clomiphene citrate as an anti-estrogenic. So most pregnancies occur in first 3 cycles, and 80% will ovulate and 40% will become pregnant in 3 cycles. Then there may be also clomiphene complications. There is a 7% chance of multiple pregnancy and twin pregnancy, and 0.3% triplet gestation, and miscarriage rate is 15%. And other side effects are hot flushes, adnexal tenderness, nausea, headache, blurry vision, and contraindication, mostly ovarian cysts. So FSH and HMG are both effective for ovulation induction in women with clomiphene resistant polycystic and clomiphene resistant cases or polycystic ovarian syndrome. Gonadotropins can be used. Then laparoscopic ovarian drilling, LOD. Laparoscopic ovarian drilling, especially in case of resistant cases of PCOS. So LOD, laparoscopic ovarian drilling, with either diathermy or laser, or sometimes harmonic scalpel is also used. So LOD with either diathermy or laser or harmonic scalpel is an effective treatment for anovulation in women with clomiphene resistant PCOS. But it has also side effects of adhesion. In 20% cases, the chance of adhesion after LOD is there. Then pulsatile administration of gonadotropin releasing hormone is an effective treatment for women with anovulation due to hypothalamic factor. When there is hypothalamic factors are responsible for anovulation, in that case, gonadotropin releasing hormone should be used. Then when there is hyperprolactinemia, dopamine agonists like bromocriptine or cabergoline should be used. Then ovarian induction with gonadotropins should only be performed in circumstances which permit daily monitoring of the ovarian response. So important is monitoring of the ovary. Then there is no evidence to suggest an increased risk of ovarian cancer when clomiphene is used for less than 12 cycles. So maximum 12 cycles should be used. Then treatment of uterine factors. So according to the type of uterine factors, the management will vary. So when there is endometrial polyp, hysteroscopic polypectomy is the ideal. And when there is presence of myoma, which is supposed to be responsible for the anovulation, so in that case only myomectomy is indicated. And intrauterine, in case of intrauterine adhesions, the adhesiolysis by hysteroscopically should be done. And when there is presence of congenital anomalies, that should be corrected surgically. So other than the uterine causes, there may be also endometriosis associated infertility. Usually there is a surgical ablation of the minimal or mild endometriosis improves fertility in subfertile women. So even if it is minimal, so treatment should be done, minimal endometriosis. And the medical treatment of minimal and mild endometriosis does not enhance fertility in subfertile women. So surgical ablation is ideal. Then ovarian stimulation with intrauterine insemination is more effective than either no treatment or IUI alone in subfertile women with minimal or mild endometriosis. There is no evidence that medical treatment of moderate and severe endometriosis, either alone or as an adjunct to surgery, improves fertility. Surgical treatment of moderate to severe endometriosis may improve fertility. So, the treatment of choice for moderate to severe endometriosis is surgery. So, in case of moderate or severe endometriosis, artificial reproductive technology should be considered as an alternative to or following unsuccessful pregnancy. Where large ovarian endometriotic cysts are detected, consideration should be given to their surgical treatment, removal. Usually, removal of the large ovarian endometriotic cyst is ideal. Then, if there is other cause, unexplained infertility. So, in case of unexplained infertility, there is most important is lifestyle modification and the advice of fertile period, and next is intrauterine insemination without superovulation or with superovulation by clomiphene citrate or gonadotropins or in vitro fertilization. So, in tertiary care, the ovulation, induction of ovulation is done, and IUI is also done. The other different types of artificial reproductive technology we'll discuss. So, next is assisted reproduction technology or techniques. When other methods fails, then assisted reproductive technology should be advised. So, it has revolutionized the management of infertile couple. And here the age should be ideally less than 40 years, but it can be used also after 40 years. And there are many techniques are there. And the most common techniques are intrauterine insemination, in vitro fertilization, and intracytoplasmic sperm injection. So these are all different types of assisted reproductive technology, ART, and IVF ET, which is most commonly used, that is in vitro fertilization and embryo transfer. Then GIFT, gamete intrafallopian transfer, and GIFT, zygote intrafallopian transfer. Then post-peritoneal oocyte and sperm transfer, pronuclear stage tubal transfer. According to the name, I think you can guess about the method. And SUJI, subjournal insemination, EC, intracytoplasmic sperm injection. AH, assisted hatching, usually before hatching, hatching before implantation, and IVM, in vitro maturation of the oocyte, and PGT oblique S, or that is pre-implantation genetic diagnosis or screening. Then cryopreservation of embryo, oocyte, or ovarian tissue or sperm, and gestational surrogacy. Then sperm retrieval techniques are TESE, testicular sperm extraction or aspiration, TESA, or MESA, microsurgical epididymal sperm aspiration, PESA means percutaneous epididymal sperm aspiration. So, IVF, in vitro fertilization, is the most important artificial reproductive technology. The couple should be aware of the emotional and financial strain. It's costly, and the success rate of the clinic should be told. Usually, the take-home baby rate is only around 20%. And in IVF, the first baby, Louis Brown, in 1978, was born in England, and for which the Patrick Steptoe and Robert Edward of England are remembered since then. For the first time, first test tube baby, it is known as Louis Brown. So the fertilization was done outside of the body, in vitro fertilization in the laboratory. So this first baby, Louis Brown. Then what are the indications of in vitro fertilization? Fallopian tubes block, unexplained infertility, endometriosis, oligospermia or azoospermia, and advanced reproductive age, fertility preservation, and multiple factors in case female or male, and failed ovulation induction, and ovarian failure. Then women with normal ovaries but no functional uterus, and women with genetic risk. So this is the technique of in vitro fertilization. Here, mature in vitro fertilization, mature eggs are harvested from the woman's ovary, and eggs are fertilized by the sperm in a laboratory. Then embryos are transferred into the woman's uterus. So in case of intracytoplasmic sperm injection, when a single sperm is injected into an egg, this is the injected at the inside the cytoplasm of the oocyte. So this is the methods of in vitro fertilization. First, there is down regulation of the pituitary with gonadotropin releasing hormone analog. Then control ovarian hyperstimulation. Ovary is stimulated for ovulation. Then ultrasound guided oocyte aspiration when the follicle size is 18 mm before ovulation. Ultrasound guided oocyte aspiration done. Then processing of sperm. Then laboratory fertilization. Then EC. If the sperm count is low, we have already discussed TESA, MESA, or PESA. Then embryo is cultured outside in the laboratory. Then the embryo is transferred on the third day, usually transcervical by the small catheter, pediatric Colles catheter into the uterus. Embryo is transferred. So this is the ovarian stimulation regimen, clomiphene citrate or clomiphene citrate with human menopausal gonadotropin, letrozole, HMG, FSS. So usually 2 embryos are transferred, usually 2, 1 or 2, but not more than 3. And the IVF success rate varies. So this is assisted hatching when there is thick zona pellucida before implantation. Assisted hatching is done, means a hole is made for better implantation. We have already discussed the pre-implantation genetic diagnosis also can be done for diagnosis of genetic abnormality. So cryopreservation of the gametes, embryos can be done for future pregnancy. Then egg donation can be also done. Zygote intrafallopian transfer means zygote is transferred to the fallopian tube laparoscopically, and gift gamete is transferred to the fallopian tube. Gift test tubal embryo transfer, post peritoneal oocyte sperm transfer. Then gestational carrier surrogacy. A fertilized egg is placed in the uterus of surrogate. Indication is irreparable uterine factors. When pregnancy may cause significant health risk with recurrent unexplained miscarriage and prior hysterectomy. Then what is the prognosis? Pregnancy rate within 2 years is about 30 to 40% and increased to 72% with repeated cycles of ART. And at last, there is another option is there. When everything fails, all methods fails, including the ART, then adoption is the last choice. So the adoption is the last alternative for many couples. Thank you. Any doubt? Okay, thank you very much.